Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Rachael, Dines and Alice Reeves. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Fantastic. It'd be easier, rather than me introduce yourselves, but also I want to know, what do you love about what you do? So if Rachael, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I run a small marketing agency in Worthing, West Sussex, and what I love is just the variety of what I do. So I get to work with loads of different clients on lots of different projects, and I also do quite a lot of business support. So I do lots of mentoring, and that means that I get to really help people, and I just love it. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. How about you, Alice?
Really similar to Rachael, actually. I'm a branding and marketing consultant, and I also run a non-profit called Joyfully Different, which is a business support organisation for neurodivergent people who want to start their own businesses. And yeah, I just absolutely love using my skills to support other people to grow their businesses. Like that is my passion, is to make entrepreneurship feel accessible and joyful for everyone.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Good to see you both. And today we're going to be exploring, leadership breaks up or business partnership breaks up, how it happens, why it happens, did we see the signs coming, all that sort of stuff, and how we navigate that and deal with that. And I'm sure there'll be lessons of how we deal with just generally the unexpected. So I'd like to start with you, Alice, and for you to just share, your story of what happened with you with your business partnership breakup, and just give us some of the probably the highlights and possibly some of the lowlights with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my business breakup happened at the end of 2022 after 5.5 years in business together. And it was both of our first businesses. So we kind of started not really having a clue what we were doing, but knowing that we really liked each other, our skills complemented each other, we were aligned in our values, and we wanted to do something differently. We were both coming out of marketing agencies, disillusioned with the industry, and wanting to do something different. And in terms of kind of where it started to end, I think there were a number of factors, and I'm really open about the fact that I had a lot of mental health problems, which resulted in me getting an ADHD diagnosis at the end of 2021. And it took me a long time to recover from that, which obviously did put strain on the business as well. And then kind of when I came back into the business, as much as we tried to kind of realign ourselves, it became really clear that our values had shifted, what we wanted for the business and our individual lives had shifted. And it just reached a point where, as much as we loved and respected each other and enjoyed working together, ultimately there became more periods of conflict than there were periods of alignment. And once that balance shifts, it gets really difficult. Like, there's always conflict when you're running a business with someone, because you're two unpredictable human beings with thoughts and feelings and emotions, and so there's always going to be conflict that comes up. But I think for me it became really clear to both of us that there had reached that tipping point where there were more periods of conflict than there were alignment, and that was the first time in the history of us working together that had happened. And actually we both kind of came to the realization at the same time. And I remember sitting there thinking, we're about to end the year for Christmas. She's got a month off over Christmas, and I don't know how to tell her that I don't think we should be in business together anymore. And then she ended up phoning me like 2 days before she went on holiday saying, I've got something to tell you. And it was that she didn't think we should be in business together. So we had a massive cry, and we didn't really know what to do or how to negotiate it. And it genuinely felt like a relationship breakup where you still really love and respect each other. You just know ultimately that you are not going to make each other happy. And so it was really painful in that way. But overall, we did both come to the conclusion at the same time. And then it was just a case of negotiating, how does this feel fair, but have us both get what we want? And that, you know, that was, again, really painful. That was really difficult. And I think I'm so thankful that the two of us had such great communication skills from doing a lot of work. And I think everyone in a leadership position really needs to work on their communication, because we were able to kind of fall back on all of those communication tools through our negotiations, avoid getting any kind of, you know, lawyers involved, and negotiate the process in a way that felt really fair, even though it was really tough. And I think ultimately we both had a fundamental respect for each other, which never wavered. And even though, you know, there were times when one of us did something, the other one was like, I'm not too happy with that. I think the fact that we both still believed in each other's fundamental goodness as people meant that it never turned into anything that was nasty. And I'm really, really grateful for that. But I think the thing that surprised me the most was how much it felt like a relationship breakup, like going through a divorce and separating your lives out from each other. And, you know, this was the person I spoke to every single day about everything that went on in the business for 5 years. And then all of a sudden that wasn't there anymore. It was a massive adjustment.
Well, not surprisingly, I mean, because when you build relationships, whether it's a business partner or people you work with, it's a relationship thing, isn't it? And so we do build those relationships, and they're strong and they get intimate and in a professional capacity. And so it's not a surprise that you felt this sort of wrenched away. You talked, and it's great that you got to that alignment yourselves together, as it were, which I think is obviously helpful, because both realizing this is not working. You said it was a shift in values. Was that from your perspective or from your other business partner, or just both of you? I don't know. What was the shift in values, having worked together? Because you did all the things that you did, what people should do when they work together or build a business together. You know, identify values, alignment on goals, alignment on vision, all those sort of things. And obviously something shifted. Was that post your diagnosis?
Yeah, I think it was post my diagnosis. And I think I realized a lot about the way that I needed to structure and align my life was not aligned with the business that we had created. And, you know, there was nothing wrong with that. It just simply meant that it was not going to work for me anymore. And I think as well, you know, there were things like we're both individually passionate about specific causes. Like for me, it's around mental health, neurodivergence. You know, for her, it was around sustainability, the climate, you know, and there was kind of like we were trying to be too many different things. And every time we tried to shift our focus on something, the other one, I think, felt like they were compromising slightly or a lot in order for the other one to have their vision. And so instead of us feeling like we were both always getting what we wanted, it felt like there were times when the other one was compromising so the other one could get what they wanted. And it was kind of this like seesaw act. And I think that became, you know, that became something that it was clear that we both had really clear visions of how we wanted to support specific causes, articulate what we did that felt very authentic and true to us. And, you know, the fact we ended up working in silos because there was work I liked and work she did and work that she liked. And so we just, it just kind of became this like diverging of our paths, I think, in terms of the impact we wanted to make on the world, the kind of life we wanted for ourselves, and the kind of work we wanted to do. And so it wasn't like that at the start, but it was that because people change. Like we are transient human beings, and it's perfectly fine and okay for us to change our minds. I think as long as when the impact of us changing our mind is handled in a way that is compassionate and communicative and honest. So yeah, I think that's a very roundabout way to answer the question, but it kind of did feel like this gradual kind of paths taking a different route rather than any kind of like break in alignment or values or anything like that.
Okay. So Rachel, could you explain your backstory to your sort of breakup?
Yeah, sure. So mine happened very differently. It was quite early on in the pandemic, and we'd been working together for 5 years, and we'd spent a year previous to that planning and setting up the business that we wanted to have. We both came from the same positions in terms of we both had our own freelance businesses running, and we both had children. So, and we both wanted to have an agency, and we wanted to be successful, and we had that ambition. But yeah, during the first lockdown, she came on a video call because we weren't able to see each other, and read me her resignation letter. And although there'd been like a couple of things, which I'll explain in a minute, it was a shock. You know, she was deciding to abandon her business, and she didn't really want me to have it either. You know, I think in an ideal world, she would have preferred to close it, but that felt like everything was being taken away from me, and I wasn't prepared for that to happen. So we had a partnership agreement in place that was broken. So the notice period ended up being cut in half. And lots of things happened behaviorally after that I wasn't expecting, because I'd become friends with this person. You know, I trusted this person. I still respect her creativity, and the output that she gave the business was amazing. She's very talented, but yeah, something had shifted for her. It wasn't thoroughly communicated, and so the fallout was that shock for me.
And was there any warning signs for you? I mean, you sort of
So
reflect
it's really
back.
strange, because about 5 weeks before that, because we were going through the pandemic, she sent me a postcard, and it was about basically weathering the storm together. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. It's really nice. And we were both having to homeschool. I had 3 to homeschool. Hers were a little bit older. And we'd had to reschedule our days to be able to manage the homeschooling and the work and get calls in and do all those things. And she had shown her support, which was awesome. But then, yeah, that was a complete turnaround. It felt so conflicting to have received that not that long before, and then suddenly it be, you know, potentially all over. I think a while before that, there'd been a suggestion that she wanted to bring a third party into the business. I think because when there's 2 of you, it's obviously you have your votes. There's no one kind of counteracting that. It's just a sort of yes, no. There's not a third opinion. And we had a mentor for that reason, but she suggested that, and I guess just didn't really go about it in the best way. The suggestion was to bring someone in that was able to do a lot of the stuff that I was doing, but then that passed, and we worked through it. And when I look back, I think, okay, that was probably the early stages, but at the time, no idea. You know, we were like, no, okay, we're not going to do that. And we carried on, and we figured stuff out, and it was fine. So yeah, some, but not completely clear.
No. And what was the reason for her deciding she didn't want to be part of the business anymore?
So I never got a clear reason. I did ask, and I think that brings its own level of worry, because you instantly think that the day after that person's left the business, they're going to be in direct competition with you. And that is, from the behavior that happened, that is what I truly believed. And so I had to prepare. I was thinking, you know, okay, we could be in direct competition in very close proximity geographically as well the very next day. It didn't actually happen. She went off to work with one of our clients and was doing her own sort of freelance projects as well. But there was never that whole, this is the absolute reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she had grown unhappy. She had a different working day to me, which I think was part of it. She was a 5 a.m. worker, and I felt like I was constantly running to try and keep up, and I just couldn't keep up. So I think eventually, even though our values were aligned and what we wanted were aligned, the day-to-day wasn't as aligned, because she'd done half a day's work before I could even start. And so my family were a bit younger, and I had to prioritize them a little bit more. And it's one of those things that I think just grows in annoyance and importance for that person.
It's almost like a ways of working started to create that sort of conflict,
yeah.
I guess.
And you would never think that would be a problem. And when we set up the business, I knew that we had character, like the personality tests you do. We had those done, and we were a great fit. We complemented each other. We worked really well together. Everyone also said that to us as well. You're such a great team. But there are just some small things sometimes that become bigger things, and that's, that leads to a problem. And I think that she was never going to change the way she worked, and I wasn't able to change the way I worked. But I guess the annoyance for me was that she was always remunerated and aware of that situation since the outset of the business. We set it up, we knew she'd be able to work longer hours, and so she was paid accordingly. It wasn't like I was, taking the same from the business and not giving the same back.
Yeah, and I think when you're in a small team of two, these things are amplified. I mean, I work with lots of small businesses, and when there's like even 5 or 6 in a team, those issues get sort of amplified, those conflicts, compared to having 20, 30, 40 people in the sort of team. Alice, emotions can play a role I would say in a positive way, but also they can be quite a negative influence. How did you manage some of perhaps the emotions, whether it's the post breakup and how you navigated that? What sort of emotions were running, and how did you work them through? And when you look back, did you sort of think, actually, I could have done that differently or managed that better in how I went through that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think I've always been someone that has advocated for emotion in business. Like, I'm never a person that can hide how I feel. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm incapable of lying because you can always read exactly what I'm feeling on my face. and I think that, my business partner and I, we did cultivate that feeling of it being really safe to express our emotions. So, we did cry together, and, we were kind of honest about when, feelings like jealousy came up, or feelings of, not being listened to, or having to compromise, or feeling like, there was, that if there was anger there. Because I think that when, it's really easy, and this thing with all relationships, the relationship ends and you look back and you start to kind of almost think about like the negative side of stuff in order to convince yourself that the breakup was the right thing to do. And I think there was an element of that. But like, again, we were so committed to maintaining our personal and our professional relationship. Like, I was bridesmaid at her wedding 6 months after our business breakup. We were so committed to that we, within our business, we always employed, radical honesty or radical candor, which was that when an emotion comes up, it's fine to discuss it and understand that emotions are transient and they're not the truth. And sometimes they just need to be expressed. So every time those feelings kind of came up for us, we were able to get in touch with the other one and say, look, can I talk to you? I've actually just started thinking about this, and I'm realizing I've got some feelings around it, and I'd really like to discuss it with you. Or, I'm thinking back to my behavior in this situation and the way I handled that particular conflict. And I want to say to you that I'm really sorry. Like, I'm looking back and I can see the impact on you, and I want to apologize for that. And so I think I am so, so grateful, every day for the work that we did in terms of our mindset as business owners and our self-awareness and our personal development, because we were able to have these really edgy conversations. And, I've seen it happen where conflict arises and someone has to leave an organization, or business partnerships break up, and one person just feels like their self-confidence or, their sense of their own value or worth or likability as a person has just been pummeled into the ground because they've been critiqued and told that they're not good enough, and
actually, I think the emotional intelligence that you two had is incredible. I don't think we had that. And I was that person at the end of the breakup that was on the floor. I thought I didn't deserve to have the business. I couldn't run the business by myself. I didn't have the confidence. It just completely knocked me for 6.
Yeah. And I've seen that happen with so many people, and like then there needs to really be a rebuilding. And you know, the both of us have just flown in this last year because we've still completely supported each other in our individual endeavors and what we're doing. And you know, and I think that when there is conflict, it is so easy, like you say, when there isn't that level of emotional intelligence, to take that conflict and make it mean something like you as a person and your capability as a business owner. And the reality is that conflict arises, I think, because there is a mismatch in values, or one person is feeling like their needs are not being met. And the only way they know how to deal with their needs not being met is through lashing out, is through anger, or is through completely clamming up and putting a wall in front of them and not engaging. And I've seen that happen so often. And you know, I've experienced conflict as a leadership, you know, as someone with a leadership position in an organization where I have had to leave. And in those instances, in that process of being managed out because someone doesn't like the way you do something, or the way you express an opinion, or the way you organize yourself or work or build relationships, can really leave you feeling like your confidence is at rock bottom. I think that is very, very true for a lot of professional breakups, is that there is always one person that just comes out of it feeling absolutely terrible. And I'm so grateful that in this scenario that was neither of us.
That's really good. And did you see have a sense of loss with that relationship, or it sounds like you still connect? You're a bridesmaid at a wedding. So what was there a sense of loss in that business opportunity you had together, or I don't know, that'd be interesting to understand.
I think the sense of loss was really for like the closeness of us as a team. And I think that, you know, there were dreams we had in the early days, you know, which never got realized. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that our lives just took different paths. You know, within that 5 years, we navigated a global pandemic. When we started, we were living in the same city. She then moved 250 miles away. So all of a sudden, we weren't meeting face to face. We weren't feeling, you know, each other's energy. We were relying on phone calls and video calls and like asynchronous text communication to communicate. And you know, that kind of created difficulties, because you know, I'm very much like, I communicate best when I am in the same room as someone, and I can pick up on all of their kind of cues of, you know, their energy, their body language, and you just don't get that when you're working remotely. And I found that really difficult as a neurodivergent person. But like, we laughed about it. And so, like, when I started Joyfully Different, I went into business with a new business partner. And like, we were joking about how it literally feels like you're, you know, your ex-wife going and meeting someone else, where you're like, you're happy for them, but you're also like, what they got that I didn't have, you know. We joked a lot about that. And but I think that it, you know, that those feelings of loss really are there. And you know, there was a while where we did just kind of say, look, we do need to take a step back for, you know, a few weeks, a few months, and maybe not engage from each other and just process stuff. And we did. And every time one of us felt like they needed that time, you know, we took it and we respected it. So yeah, I think definitely, like you were saying, with any relationship, there's a sense of loss for the way things were.
Yeah. Now, Rachel, you said just before you were floored by all this. Just unpick that for us. What you mean by floored, and how did you become unflawed, so to speak?
I think I went into the breakup thinking that we could be friends, that we would go do our own thing, be happy. We would still have lunch. We would still talk about stuff together because we had built that friendship over the years of being in business. You know, we weren't friends before. We met each other and then we were subcontracting to each other for a few years, and then we went into business together. You know, our families had got together, all of that kind of stuff. You know, support each other along the way with things that happen in your families. And then there was this announcement, and immediately I thought, okay, there's potential for conflict here, you know, if she's going to be doing the same thing and down the road and all of that. But then after that, it was the behavior that happened and the actions that were taken, and, you know, clients were taken, and all kinds of things I just didn't expect, that then made me feel very differently about her as a person, which I then felt a bit guilty about, because I knew how capable and brilliant she was, but I didn't expect that. And then because of all of those things that happened, I was left with no work. You know, I had a couple of the clients that were really, you know, really needy and weren't great. So she didn't want them. And so I had them, and then that finished. And then there was nothing. And I was lying awake at night thinking, you know, do I deserve this? Actually, am I ever going to get another client? Maybe I should have just gone out and got a job. And those things play over and over, and they get worse and they get deeper. And then you're emotionally exhausted as well. And I was just, you know, upset all the time. And I don't think until later I realized exactly how much it impacted me, because I'm quite a practical person. You know, I would just get on with things and make things happen. And, you know, I got work in the end, and all of that stuff. And it carried on. And now it's bigger and better than ever, which is awesome. But at the time, I thought, is this the end for Shake It Up Creative? Why can't I have this business that I've built? Why does she believe that I'm not capable of doing it by myself? And all of those feelings and thoughts implant themselves into you. And I had to go out and get some coaching, some business counselling, and work through it, and remember all of the things I'd achieved before, why I could do it, what possibilities there were for the future. And that, you know, just remind myself I was doing the right thing, and just slowly recover.
Yeah, confidence is an interesting one. I know I had a leadership breakup a number of years ago that ultimately propelled me into what I do now.
Right.
So there's a positive outcome. But at the time, my confidence really got knocked. And it took me probably 6-12 months to get that back, because you get sort of hammered of, you're not very good, all these narratives that were told and said of you, and realized, but actually they're not true. And also a lot of the narratives come in your own head, because we make things up, don't we? We're very good at making things up, and certainly we're very good at making up negative and not very nice things about ourselves. We're not very compassionate to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had a bit of both. Some things were in my head, and some things were being communicated to me.
Yes, I'm sure. So
yeah.
you said you took some time, you worked with a coach and counseling. What other ways did you help build that confidence back up again? Because I think it's a big thing, really, because once that's gone, it can really stunt you in terms of your growth and what your potential is, isn't it?
There was a lot of, I guess, clearing out and resetting. So I looked at what we offered. Could I offer that differently? How it was going to have to be offered differently, because some of those skills now weren't within the business and I needed to subcontract those out. Was that financially viable? All of those kind of practical things. But also there's the community side of it. So, you know, we were both in the same locality, and as a business had joined a lot of communities, various different business ones. And suddenly we couldn't be in the same room together anymore. And so I had to find new places to hang out. And I was like, okay, it's almost like that dividing, I guess, when people have a divorce. You know, I've not had one, but, you know, you're having that and you're having that. And it's, okay, where are you going to hang out? And where are you going to hang out? And that was not really talked about, because we weren't in the position to do that. We didn't have that, you know, emotional maturity that Alice had. But I had to make those choices. Okay, well, actually, where do I think she's going to be, and where could I be, and where would I be accepted, and where would I feel comfortable? You know, and part of it it's not a stubbornness, oh, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be in the same room. It's actually about, where am I going to feel comfortable and not sink down back into that loss of confidence position that I've just come out of.
And was there a sense of loss for you in the whole relationship and business and identity and all that type of thing from it?
Yeah, hugely. You know, we'd had the same goals. We'd gone into business to achieve the same things. We'd done some brilliant things together. even actually right up to the end. I mean, we were doing things that had to be delivered just before she left that went really well. And it just felt so sad that that was going to end. And people were really surprised because they just felt that we were a really good team. And so, yeah, definitely a big sense of loss, both for friendship and also for the business.
And a final question for both of you, really, to think about. When you look back and reflect on that time, in terms of how you came together with your business partners, the breakup and what happened then and afterwards, is there any lessons that you've learned that you've taken forward either into your current business or into other relationships you have within your business community? So I'll ask you that, Alice, first, if that's okay.
That's a great question. I think that because I've thought about like, how did we negotiate this so well? And I think that there wasn't anyone that was blamed. Like nobody was blamed. It wasn't this is your fault because of this, or this is my fault because of this. And we never made it about the other person. So, and I've been in situations in the past where, I have laid that blame on people, and I've had people lay that blame on me. And instead of it being this hasn't worked out, there's been many situations in the past where it's like, this hasn't worked out because of you, and because you do this or you do that. And those situations have felt so different. And so I kind of like flipping the question. I feel like we came to this both having experienced really bad breakdowns in relationships and communications in the past. And so we put all of our learnings from what had gone wrong before into like, how do we make this as easy and as fair as possible? And so it feels like, we really almost got that chance to kind of do over a lot of situations where we hadn't really acted as our best selves in the past, or we had been wronged and blamed the other person, or vice versa. And we'd had those conflicts in our own business with bringing in other people and team members leaving that turned really nasty. And every time that happened in the business, we had a team member leave in really awful circumstances, who which ended up in her saying all sorts of things about what terrible people we were. And so the very next day we booked ourselves a meeting room offsite away from ourselves, and we spent the whole day debriefing on like, where did this communication breakdown happen? What could we have done differently? Where did we go wrong? What can we take responsibility for? And how will we avoid this in the future? And I think that's really key, is how you respond to the situations when they happen. Is, there is not anyone to blame here. This has been a breakdown in communication. And now that we see what went wrong, now that we know better, like, how can we do better? And what of this critique are we going to take on board as being fair and objective, and what of this critique are we going to discard as being unfair and subjective? And that takes a hell of a lot of emotional resilience and energy to be able to do that. And it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, because like, we had a big old cry like every time anything like that happened. But I think, pulling yourself up and kind of thinking, look, I'm committed to the outcome of this being that everybody wins. And how can we make that happen?
Yeah, and it seemed that you'd already laying that groundwork in how you dealt with conflicts, how you worked from an emotional point of view. You took your own experiences, so you're almost working well as two before the sort of breakup. So that obviously really helped you. How about you, Rachel? What are your sort of learnings and advice, I guess, from your perspective?
I think it was hard for me because the communication shut down. There was a lot of questions that I asked that I never got a response to. And you don't know how people are going to be in these situations. First of all, you never think it's going to happen to you. So we had this partnership agreement in place. We were told as long as it exists, you're fine. But actually, you do need to sign it and have copies of it, and just do those completion things. You know, never rely on other people saying, oh, that's okay to have it like that. You know, do your due diligence and actually check what is going to stand up if things go wrong, because as I said, you never think it's going to happen to you. So I think that would be my advice. And I think if I could go back, there would be a lot more of what Alice had, you know, a lot more of that, the communication and the emotional conversations to really understand, because even years later, you know, I don't fully understand why that decision was come to and why it had to end for her. So I will never have that complete closure. And then you're dealing with the practical stuff, you know, in these kind of end days, you know, it's all about sorting the banking out and sorting the shares out and sorting the physical stuff out. And you have to do all of those things because the time is ticking away until the end. And so then it finishes and you never do have that conversation. So that would be my advice. You know, if you can adopt some of those brilliant practices that Alice had in place, then I think that would save a lot of pain.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your open and honesty and transparency of sharing your difficult, I know very different breakups, but still difficult from an emotional point of view, and also probably from a pragmatic point of view as well. And so, yeah, and I think there's some real lessons in there, some real insight for people in terms of going forward, in terms of building that relationship, communication, and that emotional resilience you talked about, Alice, as well. So I think there's some real helpful things there to help prevent it, but things happen and you can't stop everything. Conflict happens, and I think you know, conflict can be a healthy thing. It's how you deal with it, how you work it through, and how you have those conversations. And I think, you know, like Alice is saying, do some debriefs is really important in that sort of scenario, and keeping those communication sort of channels open. If people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what's the best way for you, Alice?
Probably on LinkedIn, just Alice Reeves, and for neurodivergent entrepreneurs, Joyfully Different on LinkedIn, or we're at Joyfully Different UK on Instagram.
How about you, Rachel?
Yeah, so the company's on all the social media, just Shake It Up Creative. And for me personally, then I'm on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to drop me a DM in there.
Well, thank you both for coming on. Appreciate Alice and Rachel. Really appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.